The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly under the gray morning sky, as the research vessel Horizon rocked gently on the waves. Dr. Daniel Harris stood at the window of the ship's laboratory and watched the water move in slow patterns. He had spent 15 years of his life studying the ocean and its secrets. He had seen underwater volcanoes and strange creatures that lived in complete darkness. He had mapped trenches so deep that no sunlight could ever reach them, but nothing in his long career had prepared him for what his equipment was showing him today. Laura Mitchell rushed into the lab with a tablet in her hands. Her face was pale, and her eyes were wide with something between fear and excitement. She was the team's marine geologist, and Daniel had worked with her for almost 8 years. He had never seen her look so shaken. "Daniel, you need to see this right now," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Daniel took the tablet and looked at the sonar readings on the screen. The image showed the bottom of the Mariana Trench, the deepest place on Earth. They had been scanning this area for 3 days as part of a routine geological survey. The trench was nearly 7 miles deep, and the pressure down there was enough to crush a submarine like a paper cup. Nothing should survive in such a place. But something was there. Something huge. The object on the sonar was almost half a mile long. Its shape was smooth and curved, nothing like the rocky formations that covered the ocean floor. Daniel zoomed in on the image and felt his heart begin to beat faster. The thing had straight edges and symmetrical features. It was not a rock. It was not a whale carcass. It was not any natural formation he had ever studied. "This is impossible," he said quietly. Laura nodded. "I ran the scan 3 times. The results are the same every time." "That thing down there was built by someone." Daniel sat down heavily in his chair. His mind was racing through explanations and finding none that made sense. Could it be a sunken ship? No vessel that size had ever been lost in this region. Could it be a secret military project? The depth made that impossible. No country on Earth had the technology to build something at those pressures, let alone place it there deliberately. He picked up the satellite phone and made a call that would change human history forever. Within 48 hours, the quiet research mission had become something else entirely. 3 Navy ships arrived and surrounded the horizon. Helicopters came and went, carrying people in suits who never smiled and never gave their real names. Daniel and his team were asked questions for hours. They signed papers that promised they would never speak about what they had found. Then, they waited. The deep-sea exploration vessel Triton arrived on the 5th day. It was the most advanced ship of its kind, carrying submersibles that could reach the deepest parts of the ocean. Commander Kevin Brooks stepped aboard the Horizon that evening to meet with Daniel personally. He was a tall man, with gray hair and calm eyes that seemed to have seen many secrets. "Dr. Harris," he said, shaking Daniel's hand firmly. "Your discovery has reached the highest levels of government. I have been ordered to investigate this object and determine what it is. I need your help," Daniel agreed without hesitation. He could not walk away from this mystery now. The team that assembled over the following week included specialists from fields Daniel had never expected. There were engineers and physicists, military experts and intelligence officers, but the person who surprised him most was Dr. Amy Sullivan, a thin woman with short gray hair and glasses that seemed too large for her face. She was a linguist who had spent her career studying ancient languages and breaking codes that had defeated other experts. "Why would we need someone who reads old languages?" Daniel asked Commander Brooks privately. The commander looked at him with an expression that was hard to read. "Because the people who found similar objects before reported seeing symbols on them. Writing that nobody could understand." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. "There have been other objects like this?" Brooks did not answer. He simply walked away and left Daniel alone with his thoughts. The first dive took place on a Tuesday morning. Daniel watched from the control room as the submersible descended into the darkness. Cameras on the vessel showed the water changing from blue to black as sunlight faded away. Numbers on the screen counted the depth in meters. 1,000, 2,000, 5,000. The pressure outside the submersible was now enough to kill any unprotected human instantly. Then the lights of the submersible found the object. Daniel heard someone in the room gasp. He understood why. The thing on the ocean floor was not just large, it was beautiful. Its hull was made of a material that seemed to drink in the light rather than reflect it. The surface was covered with patterns and symbols that curved and flowed like frozen rivers. It looked like a ship, but not any ship that human hands had ever built. "My God," Laura whispered beside him. "How old is this thing?" Amy Sullivan was already studying the symbols on a monitor. Her fingers moved quickly as she captured images and began analyzing them. "The sediment around the base has been building up for a very long time," she said without looking away from her work. "Based on the rate of accumulation in this region, I would estimate this object has been here for at least 10,000 years. Daniel did the math in his head and felt dizzy. 10,000 years ago, humans had been living in caves and hunting with stone tools. They had not yet invented writing or built their first cities. Whatever civilization had created this ship was not from Earth. It could not be. The submersible circled the object slowly, capturing footage from every angle. The ship appeared to be intact, with no visible damage or decay. Whatever it was made of had resisted 10,000 years of crushing pressure and corrosive salt water without a scratch. Commander Brooks stood in the center of the control room with his arms crossed over his chest. His face showed no emotion, but Daniel noticed that his hands were trembling slightly. "We need to get inside," the commander said finally. "Whatever is in there has been waiting a very long time to be found." Daniel looked at the alien vessel on the screen and wondered if humanity was ready for what they might discover. He thought about all the stories humans had told themselves about being alone in the universe. Those stories were about to end. The real story was just beginning. 3 weeks passed before they found a way inside. The submersibles had mapped every inch of the alien vessel's exterior, and Amy Sullivan had cataloged over 2,000 unique symbols carved into its hull. Daniel spent his days reviewing footage, and his nights lying awake in his cabin, thinking about what they might find when they finally breached the ship. Nathan Cole was the man who solved the puzzle. He was the chief engineer on the project, a quiet man from Ohio, who rarely spoke unless he had something important to say. He had been studying a section of the hull that looked different from the rest, a smooth panel surrounded by symbols that Amy had tentatively translated as directions. "I think this is a door," Nathan said during a morning briefing. The symbols around it seemed to describe a sequence of actions. "Press here, then here, then here." Commander Brooks looked skeptical. "You want us to knock on an alien spaceship and hope someone answers?" Nathan shrugged. "I want us to try following the instructions they left behind. They put these symbols here for a reason. Maybe they wanted to be found." The next dive was different from all the others. This time, the submersible carried a robotic arm capable of precise movements. Daniel watched from the control room as Nathan guided the arm toward the panel he had identified. The entire room was silent. Even the machines seemed to be holding their breath. The robotic arm pressed the first point on the panel. Nothing happened. It pressed the second point. Still nothing. Then it pressed the third point, and the ocean floor lit up with blue light. The panel slid open without a sound. Beyond it was a chamber filled with air, perfectly preserved after 10,000 years on the bottom of the sea. The water should have rushed in and flooded everything, but some kind of invisible barrier held it back at the entrance. "How is that possible?" Laura asked. Her voice was shaking. Nobody had an answer. It took 2 more days to prepare for human entry. Special diving suits were modified to handle the transition from crushing water pressure to the normal atmosphere inside the ship. Daniel insisted on being part of the first team to go inside. Commander Brooks argued against it at first, but eventually agreed. This was Daniel's discovery. He deserved to see it through. The moment Daniel stepped through the barrier and into the alien ship was the strangest experience of his life. 1 second, he was surrounded by freezing black water. The next, he was standing in a dry corridor bathed in soft blue light. The air smelled clean and fresh, as if it had been filtered just moments before. Amy Sullivan came through next, followed by Nathan Cole and Commander Brooks. 4 humans standing inside a vessel built by hands that were not human at all. Daniel looked at his companions and saw his own amazement reflected in their faces. "The lights came on when we entered," Amy said quietly. "The ship knows we are here." 2. They moved slowly through the corridors, documenting everything they saw. The architecture was designed for beings roughly the same size as humans, though the proportions were slightly different. Ceilings were higher than necessary and doorways were wider than they needed to be. The walls were smooth and warm to the touch, made from the same light-absorbing material as the exterior hull. The first room they found appeared to be crew quarters. Simple beds lined the walls, sized for bodies that would have been tall and thin by human standards. Personal items sat on shelves, covered in a thin layer of dust that was the only sign of the passing centuries. Daniel picked up a small object that looked like a photograph frame. The image inside had faded to nothing, but he could still see the outline of figures standing together. A family, perhaps. Beings who had lived and loved and died so long ago that human civilization had not yet begun. He set the frame down carefully and moved on. The medical bay was the next major discovery. It contained equipment that looked both familiar and completely alien at the same time. There were beds that seemed designed for examination, tools that might have been surgical instruments, and containers filled with substances that no one could identify. Amy took samples of everything while Nathan studied the machinery. "Some of this technology is beyond anything we have," Nathan said with wonder in his voice. "But I think I understand the basic principles. They were working with the same laws of physics we know. They were just much further ahead." Commander Brooks stayed close to the walls and kept his hand near his sidearm. He was a military man, and he could not forget that they were inside an unknown vessel, built by an unknown species. Every shadow could hide a threat. Every door could open onto danger, but the ship remained quiet and welcoming. The lights guided them forward. Doors opened at their approach. It was almost as if the vessel wanted them to explore, to learn, to understand. Amy found the room she had been searching for on the third day of exploration. It was larger than the others, filled with screens and panels covered in the same symbols she had been studying for weeks. A central pedestal held a device that pulsed with faint light. "This is a communication center," she said. "Or maybe a library. The symbols here are different from the ones outside. More complex. I think this is where they stored their knowledge." She touched the central pedestal and the room came alive. Screens flickered on all around them, displaying images and text in the alien language. A voice spoke from somewhere, soft and musical, saying words that none of them could understand. Amy worked through the night, barely stopping to eat or sleep. The language was difficult but not impossible. It combined pictures with mathematical concepts in ways that created meaning across any cultural barrier. By dawn, she had translated enough to understand the truth. "This ship is a warning," she announced to the team. Her face was gray with exhaustion and something darker, fear. The beings who built it were running from something that hunted them across the stars. She showed them the images on the screens. Worlds burning, cities falling. A civilization that had spread across hundreds of planets being systematically destroyed. "They called the enemy the Silence," Amy continued. "Because wherever it went, nothing was left. No survivors. No records. No evidence that anyone had ever existed at all." Daniel felt cold despite the warmth of the ship. "What happened to them? The builders of this ship?" Amy pointed to a star chart on one of the screens. A path was marked in red, showing the movement of the Silence across the galaxy over millions of years. The path ended at a small yellow star on the outer edge of the spiral arm. "They came here," she said. "They came to Earth. And according to this, the Silence was following them." The room was completely quiet. Everyone understood what this meant. The enemy that had destroyed an entire civilization was still out there somewhere. And it knew where Earth was. Commander Brooks was the first to speak. "We need to tell the world." Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes. But first, we need to know everything this ship can teach us. If the Silence is coming, we need to be ready." They had found an alien vessel at the bottom of the ocean. Now they needed to find a way to save humanity from the same fate that had claimed its builders. The deeper they went into the ship, the more secrets they uncovered. Daniel had stopped counting the days since they first entered the vessel. Time seemed to move differently inside those ancient corridors. as if the past and present had merged into something new. Every room held wonders that should have taken years to understand, but the ship itself seemed eager to teach them. Chris Palmer was the one who found the chamber that changed everything. He was the team's biologist, a young man with red hair and an eager smile that had grown more serious since they entered the ship. He had been exploring a section of the lower decks when he stumbled upon a door that had not opened for the others. "You need to see this," he said over the communication system. His voice was strange, filled with an emotion that Daniel could not identify. The team gathered at the entrance to the new chamber. The door slid open, and they stepped inside together. What they found took their breath away. The room was enormous, stretching back into darkness beyond the reach of their lights. Thousands of cylindrical containers lined the walls, each one glowing faintly with inner light. The containers were filled with liquid that sparkled like captured starlight. Inside the liquid floated samples of genetic material, preserved perfectly across the vast gulf of time. Amy walked along the rows, reading the symbols on each container. "These are seeds," she said with wonder. "Not plant seeds, genetic templates, DNA from hundreds of different species." Chris was already examining one of the containers more closely. "This one holds genetic material from something like a tree. This one is some kind of animal, maybe similar to a deer. This one looks like bacteria or microorganisms." Daniel understood what they were looking at. This is an ark. They were trying to save life from their world before the silence destroyed everything. But Chris had moved deeper into the room, following some instinct that pulled him forward. He stopped at a pedestal in the very center of the chamber. A single container sat there, larger than the others and marked with symbols that glowed brighter than any they had seen. Amy came to stand beside him. She studied the symbols for a long moment and her face went pale. "This word," she said, pointing to the largest symbol. "It means inheritor. Or maybe successor. The one who comes after." "No." Chris opened the container with shaking hands. Inside was a genetic sample like the others. But the display beside it showed information that made no sense. Daniel leaned in to look at the data and felt the world shift beneath his feet. The DNA in the container was human, not similar to human DNA. Not a close match from a related species. The sample was identical to the genetic code of modern Homo sapiens, stored in this chamber 10,000 years before the first human civilizations emerged. "That is impossible," Laura said. She had followed them into the room and was staring at the display with wide eyes. "Humans evolved on Earth over millions of years. We have fossil records. We have evidence." Amy was already searching the ship's database for answers. Her fingers flew across the alien interface as she pulled up records and translated them in real time. When she finally stopped, she looked like someone who had seen a ghost. "We did evolve on Earth," she said slowly. "But we had help. The beings who built this ship did not just visit our planet. They created us." The records told a story that rewrote everything humanity thought it knew about itself. The alien civilization had been ancient beyond imagining, spreading across the galaxy over millions of years. They had been scientists and explorers, artists and dreamers. They had believed that intelligent life was the most precious thing in the universe. When the silence began hunting them, they knew they could not win. The enemy was too powerful, too relentless, too patient. One by one, their worlds fell silent. Their great cities became tombs. Their history became dust, but they refused to let everything they had built disappear entirely. They designed a plan to preserve their legacy even if they themselves were destroyed. They would seed other worlds with their genetic material, modified to adapt to local conditions. These new species would carry forward the potential of their creators, growing and evolving until they were ready to inherit what had been left behind. Earth had been one of their final projects. They had found a world rich with life, but lacking in intelligent beings. They had introduced their modified genetic code into the local population of primates, guiding evolution toward a specific outcome. The result was humanity, a species that carried the essence of its creators within every cell. "We are their children," Daniel said. The words felt heavy on his tongue. "They made us on purpose," Amy nodded. "And they left us this ship so we would know the truth, so we would be prepared for what is coming. The chamber held more than just genetic samples. Hidden compartments contained technological archives beyond anything humanity had imagined. Blueprints for engines that could bend space and allow travel between stars. Designs for power systems that drew energy from the fabric of reality itself. Medical knowledge that could cure diseases and extend human life by centuries. The aliens had left humanity an inheritance. Everything they had learned across millions of years of civilization was stored in this ship, waiting for the day when their children would be ready to receive it. But the inheritance came with a warning and a burden. The final message in the database was addressed directly to whoever found the ship. "You are our children," Amy read aloud, her voice trembling. "You carry our hopes and our dreams. You are the last chance for everything we believed in. The silence took us because we did not know how to fight. We were builders, not warriors. We did not understand violence until it was too late." She paused and took a deep breath before continuing. "We have given you our knowledge. We have given you our technology. But we could not give you the will to survive. That must come from within you. The silence is still out there, moving through the darkness between stars. One day, it will come for you, as it came for us. You must be ready. You must be stronger than we were. You must find a way to win where we failed." The message ended with a final image. It showed a planet covered in green forests and blue oceans. Beautiful and alive. Then it showed the same planet, after the silence had passed through. Nothing remained but bare rock and empty seas. Daniel looked at his team. They were all struggling to process what they had learned. Their entire understanding of human history had been destroyed in a single day. "We have to tell the world," Commander Brooks said. "People need to know the truth." Daniel nodded, but his mind was already racing ahead. The truth was important, but it was only the beginning. Humanity had been given the tools to fight back against an enemy that had destroyed gods. Now they needed to find the courage to use them. The question was whether they could come together as a species before the silence arrived. The aliens had been peaceful and united, and it had not saved them. Humans were violent and divided, always fighting among themselves. Perhaps that weakness could become a strength. Perhaps the very thing that had caused so much suffering throughout human history could be turned against an enemy that had never faced true resistance. Daniel did not know the answer. But he knew they would have to find out. The announcement came on a cold morning in January. Every television channel, every radio station, every website on Earth carried the same broadcast. The Secretary General of the United Nations stood at a podium and told humanity the truth about itself. Daniel watched from a secure location alongside his team. He had spent weeks helping to prepare this moment, working with governments and scientists to verify the evidence and plan the disclosure. They had argued about how much to reveal and how quickly to reveal it. In the end, they decided that humanity deserved to know everything. The reaction was exactly as chaotic as Daniel had feared. Religious leaders declared the findings to be lies created by governments to control the population. Scientists who had not seen the evidence dismissed it as an elaborate hoax. Political leaders accused their rivals of conspiracy and manipulation. Social media exploded with theories and counter-theories, each one more extreme than the last. For 3 months, human civilization seemed to be tearing itself apart. Protests filled the streets of every major city. Violence broke out between groups who believed different versions of the truth. The economy stumbled as people stopped going to work, too distracted by the chaos to maintain their normal lives. Daniel retreated to the research vessel Horizon, which had become a floating laboratory for studying the alien technology. He buried himself in work, trying to ignore the madness that had consumed the world. Amy Sullivan stayed with him, continuing her translation of the alien archives. Commander Brooks returned to Washington to brief military leaders on the threat of the silence. It was Laura Mitchell who noticed the turning point. She came to Daniel one evening with her tablet in hand and an expression of cautious hope on her face. "Look at this," she said, showing him a video that had gone viral that morning. The video showed a woman standing on a stage before thousands of people. Her name was Megan Price, and she had been an astronaut before joining the team that studied the alien ship's propulsion systems. Daniel knew her slightly. She was quiet and thoughtful, not the kind of person who sought attention, but something had changed her. Daniel learned later that she had lost her husband to cancer 2 years earlier. She had nearly quit the project when the full truth was revealed, overwhelmed by questions about whether anything she believed had ever been real. Instead, she had found something in the alien archives that gave her a new purpose. In the video, Megan spoke without notes, looking directly into the camera, as if she could see every person watching her. "We spent our entire history fighting over things that never mattered," she said. "We killed each other over land and money, and ideas about which group of humans was better than another. We built walls between ourselves based on the color of our skin, the language we spoke, the gods we prayed to." She paused and took a deep breath. "Now we know the truth. There are no different races of humanity. There are no chosen people or superior nations. We are all the same. We are all children of beings who loved us enough to give us a chance at survival. We are the inheritors of everything they built across millions of years." The crowd was silent, hanging on her every word. "The enemy that destroyed our creators is still out there. It is coming for us. Not for Americans or Russians or Chinese. Not for Christians or Muslims or atheists. It is coming for all of humanity. Because to the silence, we are all the same." Her voice grew stronger. "We can keep fighting each other over scraps while the real enemy approaches. Or we can finally become what our creators hoped we would be. One people. One species. One civilization ready to take its place among the stars." She spread her arms wide. "The choice is ours. What will we choose?" The video ended, and Daniel sat in silence for a long moment. Laura was crying quietly beside him. "It has been shared over 1 billion times," she said. "People are listening." Within a week, protests around the world had transformed. People still gathered in the streets, but now they carried signs demanding unity instead of division. Religious leaders began speaking about the alien revelation as part of a divine plan. Political enemies started having conversations about cooperation. The prison stand of the farm, the Earth Unified Council, formed 6 months later. It was not a world government, but a new kind of organization designed to coordinate humanity's response to the coming threat. Every nation sent representatives, every voice was heard. For the first time in history, humanity was trying to act as a single civilization. Daniel was appointed to lead the scientific division. His job was to oversee the study and distribution of the alien technology. He insisted from the beginning that no single nation could control these secrets. The knowledge belonged to all humanity and it would be shared equally. Factories began producing new technologies based on the alien blueprints. Power plants that could provide clean energy forever. Medical treatments that cured diseases previously thought incurable. Materials stronger and lighter than anything humans had ever made. But the most important work was the construction of ships. Nathan Cole led the engineering teams that built the first human vessel capable of traveling faster than light. It was assembled in orbit around the moon, using techniques adapted from the alien archives. When it completed its first test flight, jumping from Earth to Mars in less than a second, Nathan wept with joy. "We are not trapped on one planet anymore," he said. "We can go anywhere. We can do anything." Commander Brooks, now promoted to Admiral, began planning the defense of Earth. The alien archives contained limited information about the silence, but patterns emerged from careful study. The enemy seemed to target civilizations that reached a certain level of technological development. The energy signatures of faster-than-light travel drew their attention like blood in water. This created a terrible dilemma. Humanity needed the alien technology to defend itself, but using it would announce their presence to the very enemy they feared. Brooks proposed a bold solution during a meeting of the Unified Council. "We cannot hide forever," he said. "The silence already knows about Earth. They were following our creators when the seed ship landed here 10,000 years ago. Staying quiet only delays the inevitable." He brought up a holographic display showing the galaxy. "Instead of waiting for them to come to us, we should go to them. We should find the silence before they find us. We should take the fight to them on our terms, not theirs." The room erupted in argument. Some called the plan suicide, others called it necessary. The debate lasted for days. In the end, humanity chose to fight. Megan Price spoke again at the ceremony where the decision was announced. She had become something like a leader now, though she never claimed any official title. Our creators gave us their knowledge and their hope, she said. But there was something they could not give us. The courage to face the darkness and refuse to be afraid. That courage was always ours. It was born in us through thousands of years of struggle and survival. It is time to use it. Daniel stood in the crowd and felt something he had not felt since childhood. Pride in being human. Hope for the future. Belief that somehow, against all odds, his species might survive. The construction of the fleet began the next day. 20 years had passed since Daniel Harris first looked at a sonar screen and saw something impossible at the bottom of the ocean. He was an old man now, his hair white and his hands less steady than they used to be, but his mind remained sharp and his heart still burned with the same curiosity that had driven him throughout his life. He stood on the observation deck of Lunar Station Prime and watched the Starship Endeavour prepare for departure. The vessel was enormous, nearly 2 miles long and carrying a crew of 2,000 men and women from every nation on Earth. It bristled with weapons designed from alien blueprints and human innovation combined. Particle cannons that could crack planets, shields that could withstand the heat of a star, engines that could cross the galaxy in months instead of millennia. Amy Sullivan stood beside him, older now but still driven by the same need to understand that had made her the greatest translator of alien languages humanity had ever known. She had spent 2 decades studying every record in the seed ship, learning everything the creators had known about their enemy. "Do you think they will succeed?" she asked quietly. Daniel considered the question carefully. The Endeavour was just the first ship of a fleet that now numbered over 100 vessels. Each one carried crews who had trained their entire adult lives for this single mission. They were soldiers and scientists, engineers and explorers. They were the best humanity had to offer, but they were facing an enemy that had destroyed civilizations across the galaxy for millions of years. The Silence had never been defeated. Every species that encountered it had been erased from existence, leaving nothing behind but empty worlds and forgotten ruins. "The beings who created us were better than us in many ways," Daniel said finally. "They were smarter, more peaceful, more advanced. They built wonders across 1,000 worlds and explored the universe with open hearts." He watched the Endeavour's engines begin to glow as the ship prepared to jump, but they had one weakness. They did not know how to fight. They had never needed to. By the time the Silence came for them, they had forgotten what violence was. They could not defend themselves because the very idea was foreign to their nature. Amy nodded slowly. "And we are different." "Yes." Daniel's voice carried a weight of sorrow and pride mixed together. "We are very different. Humanity spent 50,000 years learning how to wage war. We perfected the art of killing each other before we perfected anything else. We developed weapons and tactics and strategies for every possible conflict. We turned violence into a science." The Endeavour vanished in a flash of light, jumping across hundreds of light years in an instant. 100 other ships followed, spreading out across the galaxy like seeds scattered by the wind. "Our creators saw that potential in us," Daniel continued. "They knew what we were capable of becoming. They hoped we would grow beyond our violent nature. But they also knew that if we did not, that same violence might be the only thing that could stop the Silence." The fleet was gone now, racing toward coordinates identified in the alien archives as likely locations for Silence activity. Admiral Kevin Brooks commanded the Endeavour personally. Despite his age, he had argued that he could not ask others to face dangers he was not willing to face himself. Daniel had said goodbye to him that morning. They had shaken hands, and Brooks had smiled with something like peace in his eyes. "If we fail, at least we tried," the Admiral had said. "That matters. That has to matter." The waiting was the hardest part. Days passed with no word from the fleet. Weeks, the people of Earth went about their lives, but everyone knew that somewhere in the darkness between stars, their future was being decided. Daniel spent his time at the memorial that had been built around the original seed ship. The vessel still rested in the Mariana Trench, but advanced technology now allowed visitors to enter it safely. People came from every continent to walk those ancient corridors and see the truth of their origins with their own eyes. Amy had translated the final message from the ship's creators and carved it into the hull in every human language. Daniel read it again as he stood before the entrance. "We gave you our knowledge. We gave you our hope. But the courage was always yours." He was standing there when the message arrived from Admiral Brooks. The battle had lasted 6 hours. The fleet had found the silence in a system whose original inhabitants had been destroyed 10,000 years before. The enemy was vast and terrible. A swarm of entities that existed between dimensions, feeding on the energy of conscious minds. They had never faced resistance before. Every species they encountered had either fled or surrendered, unable to comprehend how to fight something so alien and powerful. Humanity did not flee. Humanity did not surrender. The Endeavor led the charge directly into the heart of the silence. Ships were lost. Thousands died, but they kept fighting, adapting their tactics in real time, finding weaknesses that had never been exploited before. In the end, it was not superior technology that won the battle. It was the thing that made humans different from every other species the silence had ever encountered: the willingness to sacrifice everything for the chance to protect those who came after. Admiral Brooks transmitted a single message back to Earth: "The silence has been broken. Humanity endures." Daniel wept when he heard the words. Around him, people were cheering and embracing, celebrating a victory that had seemed impossible just decades before. Amy found him in the crowd and took his hand. "They did it," she said. "Our creators would be proud." Daniel nodded, unable to speak. He thought about all the years of work that had led to this moment. The discovery in the trench, the warnings in the alien archives, the chaos and the unity that followed, the building of the fleet and the journey into darkness. Humanity had proven itself worthy of its inheritance. But the work was not over. The silence had been defeated, but the galaxy was still full of dangers and wonders waiting to be discovered. Somewhere out there, on worlds where other seed ships had fallen, new civilizations might be rising, cousins of humanity, children of the same creators, waiting for someone to find them. The fleet returned home to a hero's welcome. Admiral Brooks stepped off the Endeavor to cheers that could be heard across the solar system. But when reporters asked him what came next, his answer surprised everyone. "We did not fight to become conquerors," he said. "We fought to become protectors. Our creators seeded dozens of worlds with life. Those worlds are our responsibility now. We will find them. We will help them grow, and we will make sure that no species ever faces the darkness alone again." Daniel Harris died peacefully 3 years later, surrounded by friends and family. His final request was that his ashes be scattered in the Mariana Trench, near the ship that had changed human history forever. Amy Sullivan delivered his eulogy at a ceremony attended by millions. Daniel always said that the greatest discovery was not the ship or the technology or even the truth about our origins, she told the crowd. The greatest discovery was learning what humanity could become when we stopped fighting each other and started fighting for something bigger than ourselves. She looked up at the stars. He believed we were worthy of the gift our creators gave us. Today, and every day forward, we must prove him right. Across the galaxy, humanity spread outward like light pushing back darkness. They found the ruins of dead civilizations and built memorials to honor those who came before. They found young species just beginning to reach for the stars and offered friendship instead of conquest. And on 100 worlds where seed ships had landed long ago, they found siblings they had never known existed. Humanity welcomed them all into a family that grew larger with each passing year. The silence was gone, but its memory remained as a warning and a promise. Never again would intelligent life face extinction alone. Never again would the darkness win. Humanity had inherited the stars, and they would protect them forever.